Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Dan.
I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time, we continued chapter 21. Níniel was healed of her sickness, but she could not remember her past. Túrin, proposed marriage to her, and after some hesitation, they married. Orcs began to spread through the land, and Túrin once again wielded the black sword. Glaurung heard about the sword and went to Brethil. Túrin and two companions set out to face Glaurung. Níniel, took a sword and followed them. Dorlas turned back, and Hunthor was killed by a falling stone. Túrin continued on and managed to deal Glaurung a deadly blow, but he lost the sword, which became lodged in the belly of the dragon. He returned to retrieve it, and as he did, the dragon's venomous blood burned him, and Glaurung's malicious gaze knocked Túrin down. Today we conclude chapter 21, beginning on page 222 of the second edition. The screams of Glaurung rang in the woods and came to the people that waited at Nengirith. And when those that looked forth heard them, and saw afar the ruin and burning that the dragon made, they deemed that he had triumphed, and was destroying those that assailed him. And Níniel sat and shuddered beside the falling water, and at the voice of Glaurung her darkness crept upon her again, so that she could not stir from that place of her own will. Even so, Brandir found her, for he came to Nengirith at last, limping wearily. And when he heard that the dragon had crossed the river and had beaten down his foes, his heart yearned towards Níniel in pity. Yet he thought also, Túrin is dead, but Níniel lives. Now it may be that she will come with me, and I will lead her away, and so we shall escape from the dragon together. And after a while, therefore he stood by Níniel, and he said, Come, it is time to go. If you will, I will lead you. And he took her hand, and she arose silently and followed him, and in the darkness none saw them go. But as they went down the path to the crossings, the moon rose and cast a grey light on the land, and Níniel said, Is this the way? And Brandir answered that he knew no way, save to flee as they might from Glaurung and escape into the wild. But Níniel said, The black sword was my beloved and my husband. To seek him only do I go. What else could you think? And she sped on before him. Thus she came towards the crossing of Teiglin, behind Haud en Eleth, in the white moonlight, and great dread came on her. Then with a cry she turned away, casting off her cloak, and fled southward along the river, and her white raiment shone in the moon. Thus Brandir saw her from the hillside, and turned to cross her path, but he was still behind her when she came to the ruin of Glaurung, nigh the brink of Cabed in Arras. There she saw the dragon lying, but she heeded him not, for a man lay beside him, and she ran to Túrin, and called his name in vain. Then finding that his hand was burned, she washed it with tears, and bound it with a strip of her raiment, and she kissed him, and cried on him again to awake. Thereat Glaurung stirred for the last time ere he died, and he spoke with his dying last breath, saying, Hail, Níniel, daughter of Húrin. We meet again ere the end. I give thee joy that thou hast found thy brother at last, and now thou shalt know him, a stabber in the dark, treacherous to foes, faithless to friends, and accursed to his kin.
Túrin, son of Húrin. But the worst of all his deeds thou shalt feel in thyself.
Then Glaurung died, and the veil of his malice was taken from her, and she remembered all the days of her life. Looking down at Túrin, she cried, "Farewell, O twice beloved! Túrin Turamba, Túrin Ambara Taranen, master of doom, by doom mastered. Oh, happy to be dead!" Then Brandir, who heard all, standing stricken upon the edge of ruin, hastened towards her, but she ran from him, distraught with horror and anguish, and coming to the brink of Cabed en Aras, she cast herself over and was lost in the wild water. Then Brandir came and looked down, and turned away in horror, and though he no longer desired life, he could not seek death in that roaring water. And thereafter no man looked again upon Cabed en Aras, nor would any beast or bird come there, nor any tree grow, and it was named Cabed ne Ramarath, leap of dreadful doom. But Brandir made his way back to Nengirith to bring tidings to the people, and he met Dorlas in the woods, and slew him, the first blood he had ever spilled, and the last. And he came to Nengirith, and men cried to him, "Have you seen her? For Níniel is gone." And he answered, "Níniel is gone forever. The dragon is dead, and Turamba is dead, and those tidings are good." The people murmured at these words, saying that he was crazed. But Brandir said, "Hear me to the end. Níniel, the beloved, is also dead. She cast herself in the Teiglin, desiring life no more. For she learned that she was none other than Nienor, daughter of Húrin of Dolomin, ere forgetfulness came upon her, and that Turamba was her brother, Túrin, son of Húrin." But even as he ceased, the people wept. Túrin himself came before them. For when the dragon died, his swoon left him, and he fell into a deep sleep of weariness. But the cold of the night troubled him, and the hilts of Gurthang drove into his side, and he awoke. Then he saw that one had tended his hand, and he wondered much that he was left none the less to lie upon the cold ground. And he called, hearing no answer. He went in search of aid, for he was weary and sick. But when the people saw him and drew back in fear, thinking that it was his unquiet spirit, and he said, "Nay, be glad, for the dragon is dead, and I live. But wherefore have you scorned my counsel, and come into peril? And where is Níniel? For her I would see, and surely you did not bring her from her home." Then Brandir told him that it was not so, and Níniel was dead. But the wife of Dorlas cried out, "Nay, lord, he is crazed. For he came here saying that you were dead, and he called it good tidings, but you live." Then Turamba was wrathful, and believed that all Brandir said or did was done in malice towards himself and Níniel, begrudging their love, and he spoke evilly to Brandir, calling him Clubfoot. Then Brandir reported all that he had heard, and named Níniel Nienor, daughter of Húrin, and cried out upon Turamba with the last words of Glaurung, that he was a curse unto his kin, and to all that harboured him. Then Turamba fell into a fury, for in those words he heard the feet of his doom overtaking him, and he charged Brandir with leading Níniel to her death, and publishing with delight the lies of Glaurung, if indeed he devised them not himself. Then cursed Brandir and slew him, and he fled from the people into the woods. But after a while his madness left him, and he came to Houth en Eleth, and there sat and pondered all his deeds. And he cried upon Findulias to bring him counsel. For he knew not whether he would do now more ill to go to Doriath to seek his kin, or to forsake them forever and seek death in battle. And even as he sat there, Mablung with a company of grey elves came over the crossing of Teiglin. And he knew Túrin, and hailed him, and was glad indeed to find him yet living, for he had learned of the coming forth of Glaurung, and that his path led to Brethil, and also he had heard report that the black sword of Nargothrond now dwelt there. Therefore he came to give warning to Túrin, and help if need be. But Túrin said, "You come too late. The dragon is dead." Then they marvelled, and gave him great praise, but he cared nothing for it, and said, This only I ask. Give me news of my kin, for in Dolomin I learned that they had gone to the hidden kingdom. Then Mablung was dismayed, but needs must tell to Túrin how Morwen was lost, and Nienor cast into a spell of dumb forgetfulness, and how she escaped them from the borders of Doriath and fled northwards. Then at last Túrin knew the doom that had overtaken him, and that he had slain Brandir unjustly, so that the words of Glaurung were fulfilled in him. And he laughed as one fey, crying, "This is a bitter jest indeed!" But he bade Mablung go, and returned to Doriath with curses upon it. "And a curse, too, upon your errand!" he cried. "This only was wanting. Now comes the night." Then he fled. He fled from them like the wind, and they were amazed, wondering what madness had seized him. And they followed after him. But Túrin far outran them, and he came to Cabot and Eras, and heard the roaring of the water, and saw all the leaves fell sere from the trees, as though winter had come. There he drew forth his sword, that now alone remained to him all of his possessions, and he said, "Hail, Gurthang! No lord or loyalty dost thou know, save the hand that wieldeth thee. From no blood wilt thou shrink. Wilt thou therefore take Túrin Turambar? Wilt thou slay me swiftly?" And from the blade rang a cold voice in answer. "Yea, I will drink thy blood gladly, that so I may forget the blood of Beleg, my master, and the blood of Brandir slain unjustly. I will slay thee swiftly." Then Túrin set the hilts upon the ground, and cast himself on the point of Gurthang, and the black blade took his life. But Mablung and the elves came, and looked upon the shape of Glaurung lying dead, and upon the body of Túrin, and they grieved. And when the men of Brethil came thither, and they learned the reasons of Túrin's madness and death, they were aghast. And Mablung said bitterly, "I also have been meshed in the doom of the children of Húrin, and thus with my tidings have slain one that I loved." Then they lifted up Túrin, and found that Gurthang had broken asunder. But elves and men gathered there great store of wood, and they made a mighty burning, and the dragon was consumed to ashes. Túrin they laid in a high mound where he had fallen, and the shards of Gurthang were laid beside him. And when all was done, the elves sang a lament for the children of Húrin, and a great grey stone was set upon the mound, and thereon was carved in runes of Doriath, Túrin Turumba, Dagnir, Glaurunga, and beneath they also wrote, Nienor, Níniel. But she was not there, nor was it ever known whither the cold waters of Teiglin had taken her. In summary, Níniel finds Túrin and the wounded dragon, and desperately tries to stir Túrin awake. As Glaurung dies, his spell on her is broken, and she remembers her life. She bids farewell to Túrin, whom she now knows to be her brother, and casts herself into the waters. Brandir returns to the people and tells them what happened. As he is speaking, Túrin appears. He curses Brandir and slays him before fleeing into the woods. Just as despair overcomes him, Mablung arrives. He shares all that he knows, that Morin perished and Nienor fled, justifying Brandir. Turumbar returns to Cabot in Aras and asks Gurthang his sword to slay him swiftly. The blade agrees, and Túrin takes his life by casting himself upon the point of the blade. Mablung and the men of Brethil arrive, and find Glaurung and Túrin with the blade broken. The elves sing a song of lament for the children of Húrin. And that ends chapter 21. How many episodes did it take us to read chapter 21?
7.
7? Are you kidding me?
I think this is the longest chapter. This is longer than Baron and Luthien.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it feels like forever we've been like, and we're continuing chapter 21.
Yeah. The not that I'm like excited to be finishing up, but we're now starting 22 next week, and there's only 24 chapters in the Silmarillion. So we're getting there.
Yeah, love it.
All right, so Turumbar.
Greg, give it to me.
No, okay. Let me say this. I'm not trying to cast a definitive judgment on the character of Turumbar, but this is something that stuck out to me hearing Dan read. When he realizes what has happened, when he realizes who Nienor is, this is page 225. It says, and this is after he's killed Brandir and just before he curses Mablung, he says, it says, then at last Túrin knew that doom had overtaken him and that he had slain Brandir unjustly, so that the words of Glaurung were fulfilled in him. So I was wondering, like, what words is that referring to? And I think what that is referring to is back on page 213. That's when Glaurung has like that conversation with, he accuses him of all kinds of things. So let me read that passage, and maybe we can discuss like what exactly was fulfilled of these words. This is what Glaurung says. Evil have that. No, I can't do the voice. Evil have been all thy ways, son of Húrin. Thankless fosterling, outlaw, slayer of thy friend, thief of love, usurper of Nargothrond, captain foolhardy, and deserter of thy kin. Do you think any of that was fulfilled in him?
I think that is referring to what's already passed. But maybe there's also a foreboding in it.
That was from previous encounter.
Yeah, so thankless fosterling, I mean, he leaves his family, right, and becomes an outlaw.
Well, before that, he just that wasn't. I mean, he leaves. He's adopted by Turgon, pretty much. I mean, not Turgon. Thingol. He's adopted by Thingol.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's it.
As a child.
So adopted by Thingol, become an outlaw, killer
what
of
about
Salos or Beleg at this point. I think
Beleg at that point he's talking about, but
yeah.
But and that was accidental. But what about thankless fosterling? Was he thankless? Yeah. Was he thankless? He was a fosterling.
Well, I think Glaurung isn't to be trusted. I think when he taunts, it's like there's truths in it, but it's also there's lies. It's not.
There are lies in it, yeah, and he does lie in this.
Yeah, so I think it's a mixture of lies, but maybe it's also a foreboding. Which part do you think is the foreboding part? The slayer of thy friend and thief of love?
Well, usurper of Nargothrond, I think that's happened by now because he's pretty much given Orodreth the council to go into battle, and Orodreth dies because of it, and as well as others. Gwyndor dies. I think most of that stuff is true in that statement. Not that all of it is like with evil intent, but you know, he is like a beloved foster son of Thingol, and he kind of forsakes him. Like he never returns to Doriath, and even curses Doriath in this moment.
Well, I mean, there's another quote of Glaurung that might be the fulfillment. And it's on 2:14. And if thou tarry for Findulias, then never shalt thou see Morwen again, and never at all shalt thou see Nienor, thy sister, and they will curse thee.
Well, that's not true though. He did see her.
No, he didn't. He saw a girl, and he fell in love with her, but he didn't recognize her as a sister, and she killed herself before he could see her as his sister.
That's true.
Yeah, so I guess in one sense, Glaurung is only focusing on what he can accuse Túrin of. None of the nuances, I suppose, for lack of a better word.
It's true,
So,
yeah. Like he
like
calls
you can
him,
say true things about a person that are true, but they don't tell the whole story.
Right. I think one example of that, even in that list of things that he says, is "Slayer of thy friend." It wasn't out of malice or evil. It was like an accident that he thought he was being attacked, and
So it's true that he slayed his friend.
Yeah.
But to be a
that's not the
slayer
full
of a
story.
friend,
He's not a friend slayer.
Not saying enough.
yeah.
He's not saying enough. That's a good way of putting the lie.
I think in this statement, or in like what it's describing here, he's just overcome in despair. Like whether he was guilty or not, guilty or guiltless in all of these various things, I think he's just overcome with despair, recognizing his life has been just tragedy, like total tragedy after tragedy, that leads to him begging for death from his sword.
What were the circumstances surrounding him killing Brandir?
So this is how I understood this. Brandir comes to the people and he's telling them the dragon's dead, Túrin's dead, Níniel jumped off a cliff and she's gone forever. And then Túrin comes up and he hears all this stuff. And he's like, that's not true. I'm alive. My wife must still be alive because you're lying through your teeth.
Yeah.
The dragon is dead. So he just like reads everything that Brandir is saying is with malicious intent.
Yeah, he charged Brandir with leading Níniel to her death and publishing with delight the lies of Glaurung.
Right.
If he didn't devise them himself.
And then he cursed him and slew him.
Yeah, he
And
killed
also-
him in a crime of passion.
And also, he made fun of his lameness. That's really mean. That's
He
uncalled
did?
for.
Where?
He called him Clubfoot and spoke evilly to him. Guys, stop laughing. This is.
I'm not.
this is
I'm
just-
crying. That's how I cry. It sounds like I'm laughing.
I don't know. To me, this makes me like him less. I know he killed a dragon,
Yeah.
but
No. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So his life ends
Yeah, but
on a very down note, morally, very questionable. He makes critical errors, morally repugnant errors. However, with the lore, with what we know about Túrin, I just looked this up just to, so we had some, foreknowledge of what's to come. This is not the end of his story, according to the prophecy, or the second or last prophecy of Mandos, I think is what it's called.
oh yeah, that's what it
this-
is.
Yeah, where is it? It's at the bottom. I'm at the Lord of the Rings.fandom.com. The second prophecy of Mondo states that at the end of time, Morgoth would wage a final battle against the Valar, the final battle, and that Turin Turambar, reincarnated, would plunge Gurthang into Morgoth's heart and defeat him once and for all, exterminating evil forever and avenging the children of Hurin.
That means that Gurthang has to be resurrected too. But
And that's before, it says before Turin leaves the world's circles. So it looks like...
wait, no, because I looked up something similar and it said that it was in like the earliest version of the Silmarillion.
Yeah. It was later removed from the Silmarillion
Yeah.
by Mr. Christopher Tolkien,
What?
who is the
What?
editor.
Boo.
Well, I mean, it's a posthumous work, so Tolkien didn't really have a say. I
Right.
wonder what his reasonings were. Maybe the story
good.
wasn't completed. Maybe there isn't a story of that. And
It could have been as simple as the story didn't flow that well. Like it didn't really fit. Because the unfinished tales are similar, they just don't really fit. Not that they're not a part of the canon or not loosely connected to it. I just think it's interesting that if Tolkien's writing this story, he doesn't see this point as the end of Turin.
Yeah.
He sees Turin as a tragic character that
Oh, that's a good point.
made these decisions close to the end of his life in passion, crimes of passion, and then but his end is in victory, avenging the children of Hurin. That of all the people he could have chosen, it's this man, Turin
Yeah, that's
Turambar,
true. Yeah.
to kill Morgoth,
Yeah.
the final battle. That's interesting.
Yeah, I okay, to kind of like speak more to your perspective on this, or to give weight to your perspective. I really love this part where these elves come from Doriath, and Moblung's leading them, and he's like, "I've come to assist you in fighting Glaurung," and Turin says, "You come too late. The dragon is dead." And then it says, "They marveled and gave him great praise." Like they acknowledged his heroic deed, and they were just like, I mean, none of the elves have proven like capable of doing this. They've been trying to do this for centuries. You know, they've been at war with Morgoth, and they've just been like routed by Glaurung every step of the way. And Túrin is able to do something that
Single-handedly.
hosts and armies could not do,
Yeah.
which does say something about like his strength, his greatness.
He should be admired and applauded or praised for his bravery and his cunning, his perseverance, his long suffering. But there's other things he should be,
He reminds
Not
me of the
praised.
Punisher a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, because it just has sort of anger problems. But is somewhat of a hero, but has a tragic life.
I said this before we were recording, but he reminds me of John Lennon. I don't know like deeply the history of John Lennon, but John Lennon had some tragedy in his life. He's lost his mother at a young age. I hold him accountable for like kind of ruining the Beatles, personally. But I don't know. I mean, no one really knows any of that stuff. But he also made some beautiful music and had some, weird stuff in his life too.
Yeah, maybe the question we can end on is how do we answer the question, did this person live a good life? Because that's really the question we're trying to ask.
I do think, and I think this is consistent with what I've said before, so I hope I'm not contradicting myself here, but I think many of the things that we see that are wrong with him were not his own choosing. Like, Belig is like the prime example of that.
Or
where-
there's great mitigating factors. It's
Right.
like, well, I don't know what I would have done in that situation,
Totally, yeah, totally. We all would have been, something like this in the midst of war and tragedy.
An author will ask the question, what's the worst I can bring my hero through? What's the worst thing that could happen to them? it's a good question to ask because it forces you to place your characters in like the most compromised situations that forces them to dig as deep as they've ever dug before to like find victory, ultimate victory.
Mhm.
And so Tolkien just thought, what's the worst that could happen to Túrin? And he brought him through the worst. And
Yeah.
so even though a lot of his actions aren't admirable and aren't justified, they're at least mitigated by his circumstances. And I think he's an admirable character because of the great thing he's done.
So
Oh, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how do we? So, what are the comparisons and differences between him and Beren?
That's a good question.
Because, like, obviously, similarities are they're both warriors.
Both brave
both men.
beyond belief.
They both cause the fall of an elven
Baron's
kingdom.
like, I'll just go to Morgoth and get the Silmaril from his crown.
Yeah,
Like, that's what I'm going to do. And Turin's like, I'm just going to go kill Glaurung with my sword.
Yeah. Something I was thinking about, I almost said it as a joke last time, but it's like, what happened to the Silmarils? We haven't heard about the Silmarils.
I know, yeah.
Forever. But that wasn't part of Turin's story at all. Beren, that was a deeply intertwined with the story of the Silmarils, but Túrin wasn't. Okay, can I backtrack a little bit in light of your question, Cameron? I think one character that we can compare Túrin against is Glaurung, who is like pure evil. And he accuses and he deceives and he lies and he kills mercilessly. And he actually, in many ways, like I think the phrase he used, Cameron, was he toys with his food. He's like just pure evil. And even comparing Túrin to him, you can see that he's not just pure evil. Like if he wanted to just succumb to like the temptations in his life, he's a very powerful man, and he could have done much worse things than what he
Is Beren the best man that we have come across thus far?
I think so, yeah.
The Silmarillion. So he's on one end of the scale, and then we have Glaurung, who's not a man, on the other end. Where's Túrin? Is he like?
I feel like
55?
he's like
55%?
Yeah. Something like that.
Towards Glaurung, or towards? Is he more like Glaurung?
I think he's more like Beren than Glaurung.
Okay,
I think
all
so.
right.
You know
Not just
how
because he's a man.
Scripture says, I think it's in Revelation, that if you are, or maybe it's in the Psalms, I don't know. If you are lukewarm, the Lord will spit you out of his
Revelation.
mouth.
Yeah.
When Túrin was touring with the outlaws, and he was just he was just killing men for selfish reasons. In that sense, I think he was just cold, icy, in an evil state, uncompromisingly evil. But as he got later in his life, he had these heroic deeds and these crimes of passion that are more reasonable and understandable than being an outlaw, just killing men and robbing them. So, yeah, I think he ends up more in this tragic, compromised, heroic, like a war hero comes back from war and he's like a very bad person. Like you don't want this person to babysit your kids, but it's like you fought in the war. Like you're so brave and noble, and thank you for fighting for my freedom. But you're not nice.
What he needs is a Gandalf or an Aragorn. He needs a leader who can, because he doesn't need pushing. He's not cowardly. He needs reining in, but he needs somebody who can like harness that and shape it. He never gets it.
Well, I think he forsook that a little bit. I think Thingol was that, or could have been that, but he kind of had this prodigal son moment where he like ran off, despised the mercy of Thingol.
But Thingol got soft,
returned. Yeah, Thingol was soft. Yeah.
After the Luthien incident, he just got soft. I'm just glad that Saruman never crossed paths with Túrin, and they became like the sort of antithesis to, like, Gandalf and Aragorn.
Okay, I have one more comparison. I know we're running a little bit long, but I like doing this. I like this, like, let's weigh him against these other characters. How does Túrin compare to Frodo?
Gosh, my instant reaction is like he doesn't at all, but that's not true. I'm like, Frodo's so pure and
but Frodo is also cursed.
That's true.
Frodo, when he destroys the ring and then comes back home, he's cursed. He's a shadow over him. He can't rest. And there's something about war changes you. And you go on the front lines and you fight a dragon and you come home and you're never the same. And you can't just... Everything can't just be peachy. There is a shadow that hangs over you.
And even in the fact that Frodo, in the moment of truth, failed. He didn't choose to destroy the ring. He fell to the temptation of it and tried to take it, And I think that's kind of similar to Túrin's end, where he just was overcome by despair and darkness.
Maybe Frodo was overcome by pride, but Túrin was overcome by despair.
Now, in both cases, though, there was a good outcome ultimately, and maybe that. And I know I believe it's like pretty widely speculated that this is kind of like the action of Ilúvatar in the world. The fact that Gollum is still there with them in that final moment in Mount Doom, and even his like evil intent brings about good in the eucatastrophe of the ring being destroyed, right? And there's something about that too. Even though Túrin ultimately succumbs to despair and darkness, he does accomplish this great good in destroying Glaurung.
Yeah, I also think with the comparison with Frodo as well, Frodo's very loyal, but then also responds to a higher calling. Whereas Túrin does not respond to the higher calling. A few times, at least. Like, he didn't respond to the higher calling of, return with me to the courts, we'll see the king, he'll, like, let's just go through the process, you'll be fine. He didn't mean to kill Salos. And Túrin doesn't respond in that way. But there's also a loyalty to him, where he loves his mother and his sister, and he's trying to, like, save them and get back to them. He's trying to be a prodigal son that returns home, but he can't quite get back. Whereas Frodo gets back, but then can't stay.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think I'm supposed to wrap
my
things
last
up
word will be that when I read this story for the first time, I was so struck at Níniel's, is that her name? Níniel's.
Yeah. Níniel or
final words to Túrin. Farewell, O twice beloved, master of doom, by doom mastered.
Yeah.
Oh, happy to be dead. Just so poetic and sad. But I love it too at the same time.
On that cheery note,
Twice
if you
beloved.
like what you heard.
Can we do one last thing before we end? This is not even more cheerful, but maybe more lighthearted. How does Túrin's death rank amongst all the deaths in the story? I think it's up there.
It evokes kind of, samurai honor deaths.
It's not as cool as, who was the one that fought Gothmog? Was that
I think that might have been
one of Fëanor's son?
Yeah.
Finrod,
I think it
or
might have been
something?
Finrod. It
Yeah.
wasn't. I don't think it was one of Fëanor's sons. I think it was.
There's some cool ones. Like, this was. I think his act was really cool, but his death wasn't that cool. my opinion.
Yeah. No, it wasn't as lame as like Hunt Thor in the last previous chapter. Not chapter, but reading. Where
What about Nimrod?
Glaurung's like just moving around and disturbs a rock that falls off and hits Hunt Thor in the head and just kills him. Like, I will go with you, and he just dies. It's like that's pretty lame.
That's funny.
Tolkien introduces a character, kills him immediately.
Gosh, this story is so unrealistic. It has talking swords.
I know.
I don't know why we're reading this.
Yeah, was that supposed to be like a comedy moment? Like,
yeah, why didn't you do a voice for the sword?
yeah.
Oh,
Dan.
I don't know. I didn't know. How do you do a clear metallic?
It would have
I
been
want to
like-
do a metallic.
It would have
voice.
been like, "Yea, I will drink thy blood gladly."
Yes.
It would have been like,
Tanny like this.
But actually, before we end, that goes back to your point about like the objects having like a will. Maybe we should pick that up again. Objects and lore items having a will of their own and a conscience. If you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship. Join the discussion on Discord. And send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.